right of the political spectrum, and that will help Harry Wilson.
But not the party. The Tea Party, right? Yeah. Not the right.
But I think
the GOP.
they'd be voting for Harry Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk about the AG race. You started to talk a little bit about the money. The leader that we're going to go to you for like the numbers because I know you wrote them all down.
I have a sheet in front of me.
It's all
right?
for you. Take it away.
Kathleen,
you got through college here?
Yes. Writing things down and taking notes, Fred. Kathleen Rice has about $4.2 million on hand, and she raised about $2.9 million. Eric Schneiderman is second place, $2.1 million in the bank, and he had tried to lower expectations by noting, oh, I've been in Albany, passing all this important.
Yeah, but $100,000 of that is his money, by the way.
But that still brings him over a lot of his rivals. Richard Brodsky, for example, only raised $519,000. Sean Coffey raised about $788,000, and Eric Denala raised $787,000. Coffey, of course, though, again, dumped in a lot of his money, $2 million of his own money. So that makes him a factor in this crowded field.
And he's the only one on the air so far, too.
He's the only one on the air, and what we've seen happening is there's this kind of two-way breakaway race that's been emerging. And actually, I'm sure we'll be talking in a minute about whether or not Eric Schneiderman's going to retain his place there between Schneiderman and Rice. Rice is, of course, seen as the favorite of Andrew Cuomo, and the Cuomo people have not done anything really to tamp that down. It's still out there. It's still something that...
I think a little more so lately. They want to see how she performs.
Yeah,
she's happy to have the perception.
Yeah. Right.
She's happy I thought these numbers are all a wash for the candidates, basically. They're all about the same. If you have $1 million more than the other person in a statewide race, it doesn't amount to all that much. And I don't think money in and of itself will make that much of a difference. What surprises me is how little difference there is amongst the Democratic candidates. As we saw when they all got together to endorse the governor's signing of the bill restricting the use of the stop and frisk data.
Which is a fascinating bill. But before we get to that, though, what about Donovan? I mean, Donovan came in. He's the only Republican. Comes in at 600 and change. Not very good comparatively. 6 weeks, he says, I raised $100,000 a week. Well, that's great. Can you keep it up?
And, you know, and that was a race, too, much like Wilson, that people thought, well, if the Republicans are going to take a statewide, it's either going to be the comptroller's office or the AG's office.
Right.
And, I was surprised where he ended up.
Before we leave the AG's race, though, let's talk about the fender bender. Problem? Not a problem.
You know, it could have just gone away. I think what was interesting was watching how Schneiderman actually dealt with it and his evolving explanation. And this is what all the skills candidate. Well, first he's on New York 1, and he says, oh, we tapped the car in front of us. We didn't think there was damage, so we left. Then when he's talking to us the next day, he says, we didn't feel anything. We didn't know we hit the car, so we left. And so, you know, which one was it? And there's a lot of questions.
Also, anybody who's ever hit a car. I mean, really, there's a sound when you hit a car. There's a feeling when you hit a car. Unless you're completely oblivious to what's going on. And you know you hit a car.
And if he didn't hit the car, or if they thought they didn't hit the car, why is he punishing this poor woman and transferring her, taking her off the detail, and all these other things?
Can anyone believe that the woman who was driving, a young woman who just happens to be Elena Kagan's niece, and it's Schneiderman's personal car. I mean, I can't imagine that she must have been upset, didn't turn to him and say, Senator, should I keep going, or what do you think we ought to do here? And he probably, one could imagine, may have said, let's get going.
I mean, everybody gets out of a car. If you
hear a boom,
well, right. And why didn't he file a police report when he saw damage
Exactly.
the next day?
The problem is the handling, and I think it was very telling when you had him on Capitol Tonight. I thought it was an excellent interview where he would refuse to really kind of head on and take responsibility. He's saying, "Oh yeah, well there was a staffer driving the car." And, you know, he kept kind of having these little hedges. There was a staffer driving the car. And I immediately apologized. Right, and he's not. He could have said, "I made a mistake. We hit a car. We pulled away in haste." Right.
Well,
he called it outrageous.
And then he said, "Well, the buck stops with me, but."
Right. Exactly.
I think this conversation answers your question. He is damaged. It does hurt him.
Damaged, but does it? I mean, is it a dead end?
In a close race, it could kill him. In a close race,
but
it remains to be seen. It would be an effective TV ad. Wait until the last week of the campaign.
Good point.
I mean, so many people have had cars that have been damaged, and they're resentful of that. And this guy wants to be the Attorney General of the state of New York.
A law enforcement guy.
Or a law enforcement guy. Absolutely.
And also, you saw, interestingly, I don't know if you saw in the initial report, there was former State Controller Carl McCall.
Yes.
He's a supporter of Eric Schneiderman's. He's a wise guy on New York 1. He comes out and he says, judgment problem, big judgment problem. Then, 15 minutes later, you see a statement come from Eric Schneiderman's campaign. He says, "I've heard the explanation, and I think Eric's a man of character." I don't know. I thought the handling was terrible. It is a judgment issue. Remains to be seen who uses it. I agree with you. I didn't even think of it as the ad issue.
And Schneiderman, people have said to me too. You know, Schneiderman was most popular in New York City. He's liberal. That's where the voters come out for the primary. But also, as someone said to me, everyone in New York has had their car bumped.
Sure.
That was my point.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
Okay, let's talk about that stop and frisk bill that you just brought up. Why did what was the thinking of the governor here? Why did he do it? He's made an enemy, at least ideologically, on one particular issue of Ray Kelly, the New York City Police Commissioner, and the mayor.
This has to do with destroying hundreds of thousands of records from people who've been stopped in the very effective stop and frisk program in New York City. A lot of them are minorities. And these are people who have not been charged with anything. They weren't found to be guilty of anything, but yet their names and their social security numbers and other identifying facts were taken from them and kept on file. The governor said is that many civil libertarians, and I'm surprised that the more conservatives didn't speak up on it as well, that this smacked of big brotherism. People committed no crime. The mayor and the police chief were saying, police commissioner, well, this helps us. Well, you could take everybody's fingerprint at birth, and that would help them too. But we're not that kind of society. Right. So it seemed to me what was interesting is that Bloomberg and Ray Kelly were alone. There really weren't that many people backing him up. Some editorials, including, I think, ours in the Post. But I think that's why he signed it as an African-American, as a guy who's sensitive to civil liberties issues. I thought he was quite articulate on it, invoking 1984, the Soviet Union.
And I thought he would sign this. I thought that was his view all along. I think what he did was he basically, at least politically, said to Kelly, convince me to veto it. And Kelly couldn't do it. I think he went in this. Anyone who knows David Patterson's history knew he was going to sign this bill. He's a progressive, and this is the kind of issue he's fought for. He probably would have sponsored it had he been
in the Senate. Yeah, but there are many things, P.S., that he sponsored.
Right. Well, it deepens the point. He's had to be this fiscal conservative. If it were up to David Patterson, we'd be increasing after-school programs and spending money left and right.
The old David Patterson.
Right, the old David Patterson. He said time and again that I'm forced by circumstances to be this conservative chameleon that I kind of, my old me would have hated the new me. Here's something where there aren't necessarily big fiscal impacts of any sort. So he can be true. He can think about his legacy. He can think about what people like his father, what the old guard, and the people that he's going to spend the rest of his life among are going to see his action in this moment.
But to that point, I had somebody suggest to me today, it's because he's got an eye towards a new job because he wants Charlie Rangel's seat. Do you believe that?
No.
No, I don't.
I don't think so. I mean, I think he's genuinely a product of his community. I think he's probably heard from hundreds of people over the years that they've been stopped because they're black, or they've been, singled out for some reason because they're a minority, and he's sensitive to that, and understandably so. And there are a lot of legitimate complaints about that.
Senator Eric Adams put it very poignantly during the press conference. He said, "I have a son. Governor has a son. We have young black male sons. Are they going to be stopped by virtue of their race?"
The governor's son was stopped. It was a year or so ago.
But not arrested, as he was very clear about. He was stopped. It's true. He had somebody else's credit card.
There was an allegation of gambling on the street,
right.
too.
They were playing dice on the street. So we have 30 seconds left, and I just want to ask you guys quickly. Governor Patterson, does he manage to remain relevant between now and January?
Well, as long as the budget's still out there, he can. As long as he doesn't get it in his own way. But there's really no need for the legislature to be back once the budget's done. So whether he drags it on, we'll see.
It's very, very difficult. He drafted it. He played his hand. He said, you're going to do my thing by June 28th. And when he tried to come up with a revenue bill this week, the legislature just left it outside in the hallway.
I think the budget will keep him relevant. The state comptroller's report indicates there's worse to come down the road.
Okay, Fred Dicker, last word from you. Thank you very much. Also, Jimmy Fielkin and Ken Lovett, thanks very much, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.